Welcome everyone, and thank you for joining Avery Dennison Academy, Making Sustainability a Reality. My name is Natalia Malhanova, Director Strategic Marketing at Avery Dennison, and together with Niels Christian Skau, Director Sustainability and Marketing Excellence, we will be your hosts for today. Before we start, allow to share a few house rules. All sessions are being recorded and will be shared with you after we complete this week. And we really encourage you to ask your questions and to place them in the Q&A box at the bottom of your screen. We started yesterday with sharing sustainability trends, legislation, as well as initiatives where we focus as industry on tackling the waste we are responsible for. Today, we'll dive into the topic of a label. So what is the role of a label in sustainable packaging? And that will be a panel discussion. And right after, we will have one more presenter sharing principles of sustainable packaging. So with that, I would like to hand over to Niels to lead the panel discussion. Niels, take it away.
Thank you. Thank you all for joining once again. And as already said, we had a very engaging day yesterday. Today, we're going to talk about the challenges in the circularity and in the recycling space. And to do that for us, we have invited a range of key stakeholders within the industry and outside our own space of Avery Dennison. And I will briefly introduce the speakers. So if I can ask the speakers to turn on their videos, I will mention you and ask you to present yourself in more details. Firstly, we have Rob Graunbaut joining us, who is our Director for Paper and Films from Avery Dennison. We have Maria Nedelcheva, who is a Solution Manager for our Films team. We also have Maurice Hofftailing, who comes from our R&D team and is a specialist in adhesive and in our face stocks materials. We have Ophélie, who is a special guest joining us from CELAB, which is an association that we are members of who facilitates liner and matrix recycling. And last but not least, on a very early hour of the day, sorry about that, to Stephen, we have Stephen Mueller joining us from all the way from the US, who is the Senior Vice President of ECOR, one of our key partners in the recycling space. So could I ask the panelists to basically introduce themselves briefly to the audience? And if we start by you, Rob, could you share a bit about yourself and your profile?
Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Rob Groenitswoud. I'm 21 years with Avery Dennison. I'm responsible for, as marketing director for all the paper and film solutions. I'm happy to be on this panel today.
Thank you, Rob. If we then take Maria, could you give us a quick insight to who you are?
Afternoon, Maria Nedelcheva. I'm a product manager for films, working together with Rob for 7 years. I'm responsible for all our filmic solutions in Europe.
Thank you. And if I look to you, Stephen, could you give us a quick update about yourself and your business?
Yes, my name is Steve Muller. I'm with ECOR Global based in Venlo, the Netherlands. The business we're in is to convert waste cellulosic feedstocks, including liner paper, such as that provided by a number of manufacturers in Europe. And our business is to make a finished hardboard to replace MDF, particle board, HDF products.
Very good. We're going to hear much more about that later in the panel. Ophélie, as a lead into you, could you give us an insight about your role?
Yes, hello. So I'm Ophélie Gourdou. I'm actually an independent consultant in sustainable packaging, and I'm coordinating CELAB since the beginning, so since March last year. And CELAB is a consortium of the self-adhesive label industry, aiming to create more circularity in that industry.
Very good. And again, we're going to talk much more about that, sorry, a bit later. And last but absolutely not least, Maurice.
Yes, thank you, Niels. So my name is Maurice Hofftailing. I work 19 years with Avery Dennison, all 19 years in R&D, and I'm involved in a lot of projects related to sustainability.
Very good. Thank you all. And as we both can hear and see, this topic has a lot of traction. There's so many conversations going on in the ecosystem about circularity and recycling in general. So maybe starting out with you, Rob, how is the industry kind of tackling this discussion in terms of investments and kind of looking forward on associations involvement and so forth? Is this something we are working towards as an industry?
Yeah, Niels, I would say very much so. I think, all the challenges that sustainability brings us, I think the key word here is collaboration. Yeah, and collaboration across the value chain, stepping outside of your own comfort zone, work together and get these big challenges, one way or another, find answers for that. So I think a lot of those collaboration actually that takes place in the industry associations. C-Lab is obviously a very good example of that, but also, there are a lot of associations like, for instance, Recyclas, where all kinds of members from the value chain are part of, and where on different sustainability challenges there are different discussions going on, I would say.
All right. So a lot of engagement from us in these associations. Since we now bring up the associations, maybe Ophélie, you can shine some light on what is C-Lab, what are we doing there, and what is the ultimate goal of C-Lab?
Yeah, so C-Lab is a consortium of now 32 members across the value chain of the self-adhesive label. So we have raw material producers, label stock producers, and label users. We are looking to close the loop and to have brand owners, so label users, and recyclers and collectors. And what we aim to do is really to facilitate the creation of collection and recycling solutions for the liner and for the matrix in order to recycle them. And when we say recycle, it's to really that the materials stay on the economy. So this is a way to create more circularity. And I don't know if you want to have more details now, but this is more or less the principle.
Okay, thanks. Yeah. We can circle back to that topic a little bit later. Also, again, encourage the audience to place questions in the Q&A, and Natalia will support us with the questions you might have to the panel, so don't hold back. Stephen, if we talk about liners and to an extent matrix, and we use our own platforms via C-Lab to get hold of these products, what is then happening with it, and what kind of challenges do you see in your space utilizing all this waste into your streams?
Well, for us, it's a blend of various waste streams, and so the sort of the art and the technology for us is to find ways to put the liner waste type product into our blend of pulp, which is effectively a pulping system, because we use no glues and we want to have as few chemicals as possible. The liner waste has been somewhat of a challenge for us. Frankly, with your help and others, we've been able to successfully put it into our standard production line, which is about 10,000 panels a week, starting in March. The plant in Venlo is the first automated facility in Europe for us. And most important to us is to have a steady supply of reliable waste feedstocks that are consistent. I think the advantage for us of the liner waste has been that it's a very consistent product. And we think that it's going to be as much as a 20% element in our entire product line as a stable part of our production.
All right. You mentioned some challenges. Just as a follow-up, one of the things that we talk about when it's liners is the siliconization of the liners, which is an inherent thing of utilizing liners. Can you overcome that challenge in your process?
It was hard, but yes, we have. And I think the hard part for us was recognizing what the maximum percentages of the feedstock could be part of our system. Typically, our system includes some agricultural waste, such as roadside grasses and grasses from airports, as well as regular waste paper as we know it that is in the market space commercially. Pre-COVID, that was a $100 a ton product. Now it's $300. So we're looking to alternate waste streams, and thus far we've been very pleased with our ability to convert the liner waste into a successful circular product. Our product's a hardboard. It can have a life of 20 years, like a piece of plywood. So I think it's important that we all keep focusing on these new waste streams that are a little bit off the mainstream, as would be a liner waste.
Okay, interesting. If I'm turning to you, Maurice, or turning not against, but to you, with a few questions, you are we are all to an extent experts here, but you are the most expert on the product that we're doing. What in terms of R&D and development can we do to ensure that we enhance the circularity of the products we put into the market as an industry? Is there anything specific that the associations could look to, or we as a company are doing to facilitate this?
Yes, of course. It's first very important to look at what is which recycling are we looking at. So there's a lot of recycling on plastics or on glass or on any other products. So it's very important to know exactly what the recycling process is, and therefore it's very important to also have the whole value chain together to make sure we understand the full process. So therefore, indeed, the associations are very important because there we have the full value chain present. Also making a new product suitable for recycling, enabling recycling. It takes some time. We cannot make a new adhesive or a new product from one week to the other week. So we need to make sure we understand the process very well and have all the CTQs on the table. Because if we miss some, it might be that after a year of development, suddenly we figure out, well, it's not suitable, it doesn't work. So therefore, these industry associations are very important because there we really can set the guidelines or testing protocols to make sure we make a product which fits basically the recycling.
Yeah, makes all kinds of sense. Sorry, Rob,
Niels, can I build on that?
Pretty please.
So actually, Maurice brings up a very, very good point. I think what has fundamentally changed in the label industry is that you typically had, let's say, the traditional value chain. We buy our raw materials, we make the self-adhesive laminate. It goes to the converter. A lot of the converters are today part of our audience, and then obviously it was sold to the brand owner. It ends up on the packaging. I think now with the whole sustainability, actually the value chain has become much more diverse. And all of a sudden, also for the label makers now, the recyclers, but also the sorters of plastic packaging waste, for instance, or whatever waste, have now become our customers, so to say. And all of a sudden, there's totally new and different requirements for labels when it comes to enabling recycling, for instance. And I think the beauty of this industry association is actually that all those parties, no longer really a value chain, but more, let's say, the ecosystem, they come all together in those associations, and we try to have a healthy debate. And what you sometimes see, for instance, is that a label needs to have certain requirements to enable recycling. For instance, it needs to wash it off at a certain temperature, let's say. But then again, it might conflict, let's say, the label in use. For instance, the label falls off the packaging during the shower. So there's a conflict between recycling and the product in use. So there's a lot of healthy debate in those associations how to overcome typically this kind of challenges.
All right. Good feedback. We've been talking quite a lot so far about ecosystem and associations. Maria, you are quite strongly involved in a lot of discussions with end users and brand owners, and the word eco-design came up several times in our discussions yesterday. What are you seeing in the engagement with the actual users of the label space?
see them following the trends. Of course, there is a trend also coming from legislation with different regulations that we see coming in Europe in the next 2, 3, 5 years. So definitely we see a lot of attention from brands trying to prepare for the regulation. But on top of that, there is also their own sustainability targets. And we start to see a very increased interest into all the products which have recycled content, but also products that enable recycling. And especially for enabling recycling, of course, eco-design is very important to consider for the new product ranges. So what I personally see is that for the existing ranges, it's not always so easy for them to change the design, but at least there is a lot of interest for the new product ranges to launch them already with a recyclable packaging, which of course is very good.
Yes, we also mentioned again the associations, and I think it has been mentioned before that this requires cross-functional collaboration in the ecosystem we work in. So again to you, Maria, when we work in these associations, do we then experience that it's solely label converters and label producers, or do we see the brand owners materializing in the same panels, in the same discussions?
Maurice is also there quite more frequently than me, but I think that is the benefit of a lot of these associations, that everybody is sitting on the same table. Mm-hmm. And the goal would be even that we make them even more and more inclusive, because when you make a guideline, you should not only look at the recyclability, but you should also look at the usability of the product and of its life cycle and how durable must the packaging be. After all, we need to design for recyclability, but we also need to consider that the packaging has a certain function. And I find, for example, very interesting what the Dutch KIDV, the Institute of Sustainable Packaging, does, because they look, just as an example, they look at the packaging itself. So, for example, if you reduce the weight of your packaging, or if you include a label which would enable the recycling of the packaging, you would get a higher rating. But you would also get a higher rating if, for example, by changing your packaging, it may become a bit heavier, but it would protect the product better, so that the product would have a longer life cycle. So they take into consideration really the whole life cycle of the product which is in the package and how can it be optimized.
Yeah, there's a lot of misconceptions going on in the space about this one, that a material is better than another. And we talked about it yesterday, again, that it's important that we make our decision based on data. So the SBTIs and the actual true LCAs, it's quite crucial that we do this. And I think the associations are helping us kind of put that on the agenda. Maurice, I think Maria kind of threw a ball to you about commenting on how you see this engagement with the brand owners and associations. Is there something we can do to further enhance the discussion in your optic?
Well, the discussions are quite good in these associations, and it's not only dictating each other on how to do it, but also understanding each other on why should we have maybe a thicker bottle or a thinner bottle, a bigger label or a smaller label. So it's also really understanding why we should do these kind of things, and to better be able to recycle. And as I said, so to have the full value chain over there, you sit among each other and make sure that if you have a question, that you have the right people on the table to give an answer to the problems or the misunderstanding you have.
Correct. Is it, maybe I'm making an assumption and just stop me here, but is it correct that I assume and see and feel more personally that the end users that actually utilize the product are more putting the actual technical experts into these discussions, that it has moved from more a commercial nice to have to an actual need now, that it's embedded into their strategies? It's a broad question, so the panel can just scream at me.
I can maybe take it. I see definitely more and more realization as well that, as you know, it has been on the news, right? But there is simply not enough of PET bottles being recycled today to fulfill all the demand for recycled PET in all the segments. So I think there is definitely a lot more understanding that if we all have targets around recycled content, for all of us to fulfill them, we need to collect and recycle a lot more. And I see a lot more brands also being understanding this, what Maurice said, so really understanding each other's challenges and trying to work towards eco-design, so towards designing packages for recyclability. But it is also what Stephen mentioned, that when you design your product, you also need to consider how long it's going to be used, right? So you can only use recycled or recycled material as raw material if you also can engineer that it will fulfill the purpose of your product. So in that sense, I think associations are very useful because we really understand better each other's technological challenges, and then we can address them also together with pilots or with new projects.
Yeah, and maybe to add to that, indeed, Maria, you know, these associations also help us to go, let's say, to the European legislation to make sure that, to look at if something is feasible or not. So we are also, or at least those associations lobby at European Union level. You can imagine also, like a PET bottle, if we would have over there that all PET bottles need to be of 100% recycled PET. Well, you know, that's not really going to be very feasible, because you always need to have some, you know, virgin material in the system to be able to create recycled PET.
Niels, if I may jump in and ask a question to the panel.
Feel free.
It's clear the panel is very excited about the topic and passionate about the topic. Could maybe one of you, or few of you, the most passionate ones, share what is that you are proud of in terms of achievements so far within your business? And a second point, where do you see a challenge that could have a quick fix? Like, so what step could our customers or could the brands do already today to start moving in the right direction?
Anyone? Stephen, I'm looking at you maybe because you have a lot of ecosystem engagement. You talk a lot to the brand owners. Maybe you can share what you have seen and heard.
Yeah, I was trying to formulate a concise response to a rather broad question. But what we've found in the research and development in Venlo over the last 10 years with brand owners primarily is that there was a want to, but not a need to. So where we're now seeing brand owners is coming from the top down. We must become more sustainable. We need to figure out what is the term circular economy, and then how do we fit into that? And I guess our time has arrived with Ecor, because most of the product that we make does not have a 2-day or a 2-week lifetime. Most of our products go into in-store displays, they go into packaging, they go into manufacturing. So they have both a upcycle and a longer life, as well as the ability for us to further recycle it. So I think that the part that's important for us with organizations like C-Lab and others is to get the word out with brand owners that it's actually happening, that there's actually solutions for taking a liner waste and permanently upcycling it into a panel that will be a wall at Schiphol International Airport in June, for example. I mean, our products are always waste that are not going to be recycled or rarely to be recycled. And most of the product that we bring in ends up either going to us or to an incinerator. So we're the last step in upcycling or turning into electricity and heat. And so partly for us, I think it's important that we broaden the message to the brand owners as well as to the converters, and get, like with yourselves, to be able to get a steady flow of reliable product at a reliable price.
Okay, thank you. I'll just have one follow-up, and then we can see if we have some questions from the audience. Natalia, to you, Ophelie, Stephen is talking about the need for a stable stable supply of raw materials, which is the collected liners in this case. How is the engagement from C-Lab out to the ecosystem, into the brand owners? How are we proceeding on that? Any progress you can share?
Yeah, actually, it's one of the challenge of C-Lab by collecting and recycling the material is to really reach out the label, the brand owners, the ones that use the label, and to make them aware that the liner is recyclable and how to recycle it. So I think there's one side. So there are like two sides of the project. One is to really create the solutions, and two is to educate the label users or even the label converters that their material is recyclable. And so we are doing that in parallel. So we are really working as well in collaboration. So you name very often, so collaboration with associations, with other companies. And this is really the work that C-Lab is doing. We are in contact with Petcore to find the new pet liner recyclers, for example. We work with CEPI on the paper side, and recently with Afera, which is an adjacent industry on the tape industry. So we really engage all the players so that the solutions are also adapted to the different companies. So to the big ones and the small ones, the ones that are in like small countries or big countries. So this is what we do, and we have recently created a communication work stream. So we work by a work stream to be able to make everybody aware that C-Lab is really like the kind of central place to go when you have a liner or matrix to recycle, and create. Yeah, you spoke about ecosystem. I really like this word because it's really getting all the players together and build this circular stream that doesn't exist in big scale today. And again, here the scale is all Europe, so it's many countries with different environments in terms of regulations, in terms of size, in terms of how the different companies are in a geographical area. So we want to understand all of that.
All right. It seems like we all are trying to create this circular flow here, which is really good. I suggest we just have a quick look if there's any questions from the audience, Natalia.
There is actually to the last speaker. Who do you think should educate the brand owner, in your opinion? Who should do that?
Everyone. Everyone in the value chain. So if you use label, it's because you buy them. So maybe your supplier can help you, to find a solution. Like the whole value chain, created C-Lab as well to support, because it's not relying to just one group of companies. So this is how we try to support as well. And yeah, I would say it's the responsibility of all of us that create the material, and also to once we have recyclers and collectors well in place, they are also, of course, it's part of their business, so they would be as well able to communicate on that.
Yeah, I think to add a little bit to that, so it's not only the value chain that ends at the brand owner. I think also the consumer is very important in making sure we can recycle material by disposing it correctly. I know there's different ways of disposing throughout Europe or throughout the world, I guess, but to make sure we don't let's say contaminate the different waste streams because we are not aware of how we should dispose our waste.
Thank you, Maurice. And maybe a question to Rob. You're talking also to brands on a daily basis, I think, on the topic of sustainability. And we all know that this topic is important for them, and majority started with changing or using recycled content in the main primary container, so a bottle, for instance. Today the session is about the role of a label. Do you see the focus shifting from a bottle towards a label, or is that focus still not there? What's your perspective?
I would almost say all of the above. So, and for different reasons. So clearly, recycling the primary packaging is the #1 priority. That holds the most value, and that also holds the most value for recyclability, right? So a PET bottle in the end should end up as recycled PET in a new bottle. So really circularity. There's two things I think that is fundamentally changing. First of all, there's much more focus on the label, because a label, in that whole recycling process has a big impact on the recyclability of the packaging. So clearly there's a shift of focus. So really there's more and more interest in solutions that enable the recycling of the primary packaging. That's what we clearly see. We also know that certain waste streams, like for instance HDPE or PP bottles, that is not so advanced as, for instance, what you see in the polyester waste stream, where very often those bottles or packaging is recycled together with the label. So there's a lot of, and I was actually thinking during the discussion, what you also see, I think Maurice mentioned that, is that in a lot of the associations also, we're basically challenging the status quo. There's a lot of beliefs. For instance, what is the impact of a self-adhesive label on the HDPE recycling? And there's a certain belief. But actually we have seen, for instance, with Recyclas, they went into a scientific study to see, okay, what is now really the impact of a self-adhesive label within that waste stream, and what is the impact, so to say. So they've done a scientific study, and actually what they see is that you can actually still recycle this kind of bottles with the label. And actually they made new recycled HDPE bottles out of it, and actually they were having the right quality. So then, based on that kind of scientific study, they also adjust their guidelines. There's a little bit of a sidestep. So what you then see, if you then come back to design for recycling, what for instance Maria was saying, if you have then, for instance, let's say you have an HDPE bottle with a good old P85 label, for instance, and you want to be a more recyclable, and you know that, for instance, the P85 label is recycled together with the bottle, why don't you also don't use, let's say, a label with recycled content, right? So you increase the overall sustainability footprint of your packaging. So there are lots of solutions, I think, in the industry to make your overall packaging much more sustainable. And we see those developments going very, very quickly.
Good to hear. Thank you, Rob.
Very good. Do you have any questions from the audience right now you want to share? We take them from later?
Yeah, not yet, and therefore would like to encourage audience. There is a Q&A box at the bottom of your screen. Wake up, please. It's raining in the Netherlands. I hope it's sunny in the other parts of the world.
Feel free. We pulled someone out of bed 4 o'clock in the morning to answer your questions. But now we hear about education of the market again, and coming back to you a little bit on this one, Ophélie, we talked about education already. Is this, you kind of shed light on it already, that we're doing quite a lot on the communication stream, but is this also your optic that the industry is kind of ready for this, or is it, are we fighting uphill battles, or is it like opening up more and more? Are you seeing the same where you're sitting?
Yeah, okay. I think one of the challenge of this material, so I'm speaking about the liner now, the liner of the self-adhesive labels. And actually, the ones who use them, this represents a really small quantity of waste compared to the rest of waste they generate. So I would say that it's in the list of priority, it's really on the bottom. And this is part of the challenge, to really motivate them to collect separately this material and find a solution to be collected and recycled. Nevertheless, I mean, this material has a very good value in terms of fiber quality, in terms of, I mean, you told it, Stephen, that it was really a consistent product. that can be used to recycling or even upcycling in your case. So this is what we try to show, that there's a real value, and it makes sense to recycle it rather than incinerating or landfill. Yeah. So so some companies are doing it anyway. They really make this extra step. And I believe that with all the legislation as well as the pressure on, let's say, sustainability targets, I think like the production sites will be more and more interested in finding solutions. So it's going really in the right direction, and the legal aspect really help, and also from the customers as well. Customers, they would like to see as well now numbers in terms of how sustainable is this company and so on. So all these sustainability reports have as well a big role to push in that direction.
Yeah.
I have one question for whoever wants to pick it up. It's a challenging one. Consumers becoming more conscious. Still, we hear education is missing. And sometimes we hear that the brands consider or are thinking between paper or film. What is the most sustainable option? So this paper film discussion is coming back all the time. What is your perspective? What is the truth? Should it be paper label? Should it be filmic label? What is the most sustainable option? And I was thinking maybe Maurice or Maria, because you are having, I think, these questions pretty frequently.
Well, I guess this is, let's say, often in the discussions in associations. Yeah, this is a topic, and mainly you see that plastic has a bad name, but basically it's as long as it's used correctly, it's a good product. Papers in general, have the tendency to lose fibers. And having fibers in, let's say, in a recycling process are just, it contaminates. It contaminates, let's say, in blowing a bottle. If you have a fiber over there, it will make a hole, so the bottle will not be blown correctly. It can plug filters. So therefore, you see a tendency, let's say, of in such recycling streams to have more filmic labels.
If I build on that, yes, paper label on a paper package. Plastic package in general, unless it's going to be a special label with wash-off adhesive for some of the returnable crates, for example. If it's a plastic package that will go to the recycler, it should have a plastic label. And ideally, in the future, we will be in a stage where everything will be washed off or recycled together. But in general, yes, plastic with plastic and paper with paper. We should stick to those rules.
Take it away, Maurice.
Yeah, sorry. So that's correct, Maria, indeed. Mono material, so indeed plastic with plastic, paper with paper. And I also, right now, I see myself, sometimes you have a tunnel vision. You're thinking about one way, one type of recycling stream, while basically maybe that's not always correct. So you need to indeed always make sure which recycling stream is it going into, and does it indeed fit that recycling stream.
Exactly. There's no one right solution, but you always need to, also what Ophélie was explaining, every country in Europe has slightly different collection system. Some have deposit systems, some don't. Some have all the beer in returnable bottles, which are going to wash off, to be washed. Some have one-way glass. So always we should think, okay, how is my package being used? Where is it going to be disposed? How is it going to be recycled? And then those three questions should basically determine whether paper or film is better.
Great, thank you. Thank you very much. It's also great because we have more questions coming in. So thank you, audience. Are sustainable materials causing any issues in the recycling streams? Interesting question. So are sustainable materials harmful for recycling stream? Any feedback from the panel?
Did anyone get
bio-based materials or
sustainable materials? You're asking, Natalia?
Yes.
Yeah, sustainable materials, if they are harming the recycling stream, the circularity of it, of course, it's a bit of a broad question, because under sustainability, you can kind of put a lot of eggs in the same basket. We have the recycled materials, we have the bio-based materials, and so forth. But as a general question, is there any watch out if you are talking to a brand owner wants to specify material that enables the recycling? We often get this question. We want something that is sustainable, kind broadly, and do something with this, please. So the question is more: is there any kind of golden rule of thumb that you can go for that helps you make the right choices? It's a tough one. I see you pausing, all of you.
You hear a couple of brains.
So
for me again, Niels, I think it comes back a little bit to the discussion and the points Maurice and Maria were making. I think generally the label has to stay as close as possible to the primary packaging. Yeah. Just to give you, but if you take it something from a totally different angle, look for instance in countries like Italy, and I think even now France, where you go to the supermarket, you buy your fruits and your vegetables, you buy this in this biodegradable special bag nowadays, yeah, and then you put it on a weigh scale, and you get your label. If that label is, let's say, a standard label, standard paper, or even maybe sometimes even from a filmic material, you know, then your bag will be biodegradable, but your label will not. So in that sense, it needs to be, again, you also need to biodegradable or home compostable or compostable kind of label. It's more, you know, again, it's very much comes down to where's your primary packaging made of, how is it disposed of, and how is it recycled? I think those are the key questions.
So again, about the education, about the audience we are talking to, how to make the right choices. Thank you.
Very much so.
Further questions?
Yes, talking about choices. Maria, I think it's a nice one for you, because you mentioned the topic of plastic, paper, and paper. Can you explain monomaterials a bit more? Can they be used in all packaging? So what is the monomaterial principle?
Yes, good question. First, also just to build on Rob's point. So, for example, compostable or biodegradable films are not compatible with plastic recycling. So they have their composition, because they are biodegradable, makes them not suitable for PET or PP or HDPE recycling. So that's, for me, the first kind of rule of thumb for non-compatibility. But yeah, also monomaterial, when we speak about PET bottles, in any kind of hot wash recycling process where you need to have very clean, high quality recyclate, you need the labels to separate. So you have the sink float separation process. And to enable that, you actually don't follow the monomaterial principle, because the goal there is not that you recycle the label together with the package. But every time when you have hot wash, the goal is always to separate the label from the package. And in that case, actually, you should not follow the monomaterial principle, but you should follow the eco-design, which means that you need to have a polypropylene label, or in any case, any kind of polyolefin label, which has the density lower than 1 after printing. So the label, including the inks, needs to separate, and therefore, you should actually not use a PET label for a PET bottle today with the current recycling streams, because the goal there is to separate them from each other.
Yeah.
Yeah. There is actually a question that builds on this, Maria. Is there like a general insight, or what percentage of non-main components could there still be present in order not to harm the recycling? So is it monomaterial? It means it should be only monomaterial, or is there some percentage which is okay to be as a contaminant, to be seen as a contaminant?
I think Recyclass has certain guidelines. Maybe Maurice can help me.
Well,
after my answer, but in general, there are also limits to the size of the label and how heavily it can be printed in order for it to be recycled, for the HDP, for example.
Yeah. So please, Maurice.
Yeah, sorry. I think to build on that, indeed, there contaminants like an adhesive is also, let's say, a contaminant in that stream, and basically also in the recycling process, everything is let's say not allowed unless you've proven that you can use it, and basically that's what we have done also. Also with some of our products in Recyclass, just do the test and show that it might not be, let's say, limiting the recycling step. As we looked at, let's say, for adhesives used on labels when you recycle the label with the container, and that also goes for other brand owners who have, let's say, got, let's say, the approval from Recyclass to use their products with, let's say, inks on there, because inks are then also, let's say, a contaminant. So yes, you basically there are guidelines, but these guidelines are really guidelines unless you've proven that it can be used by doing the testing. Then you can get the approvals.
Just to add a comment on this one, we heard Sam yesterday, Sam O'Keefe, talking about the legislation and what work is going on an EU level. We do believe that there's going to be some guidelines coming out that will try to define this, but it's a very open discussion still, and there's going to be quite a lot of national legislation and national guidelines coming in here. So if you have very specific questions on specific projects, just reach out and we find the right people to help you on this one, because it is truly complex discussions. But there are some overarching guidelines we can support you with. Do we have a further question?
Yes, we do. So Niels, you will have to stop me when we are out of time, please. But yes, we have a question all the way from Japan. What is better for the earth, chemical or SRF, which I believe should be mechanical recycling in your terms? So I allow myself to make that comment. Anybody would like to comment? What is better, chemical or mechanical recycling? What is perspective of Europe on the choice?
I think in respect to chemical or mechanical recycling will cost less energy to recycle. So as long as you have a clean stream, it's probably best to go to mechanical recycling. You always will have a kind of more dirty stream, more difficult to clean. That you can use then in chemical recycling.
Yes,
Okay.
and to build on that, I think mechanical recycling, especially from a carbon footprint, is more favorable than chemical. But in today, for instance, less developed recycling streams like PP or HDP or polystyrene, you will have difficulties to have good chemical recycled materials, and especially if you require, for instance, food approval. So then by default, you need chemical recycling.
You mean
Also,
difficult with mechanical recycling, Rob, to get the food approval?
Right. Yes.
Yes.
So with mechanical food, you will not get the food approval. So therefore, you need chemical. But also, if you see the need, and if we all have to, and we need to follow the European legislation, obviously, if everything needs to be like 30% recycled content by 2025, I think the date is, we will also not only make it with mechanical recycling.
Nope.
So, we need, I think both recycling technologies will find its place, absolutely, mechanical and chemical.
Got it. Just a follow-up on this one on the mechanical versus recycling. Is that anything you have dove into yourself, Stephen, in eCore, comparing the various technologies?
Yeah, we have no choice but to do mechanical because we're a chemical-free product. As chemicals go, there's a chemical in everything, but generally speaking, we won't do any mechanical pulping. We certainly find that contamination is an issue, and that's why we have blends. I've been listening to the conversation here and coming back to liner paper. You know, for us, the challenge was process, and it's taken us probably a year of playing around with liner waste and learning how to work with it. I think it's really helpful that the association and the manufacturers are now encouraging their customers, the converters and the retail producers, to actually separate the liner paper, because we're now getting a really clean waste stream, and that allows us to pre-process that particular waste stream. Whereas, for example, from Schiphol International Airport, they have the recycling bins, we get the paper waste, and the Traveler is pretty good, but not that good. So I think what's important, and we talk about brands and brands looking back to their label suppliers and the process of getting the label onto their product, that we have that knowledge from the brand owners and their agencies, that with separation at source, there is value to that product, and it will have a long life. It won't have just a 1 or 2 cycle before it's incinerated. I think one of the views of our company is that we're upcycling product for long life. Every wall and every new building will end up having an E-Core type product on the wall, and we need quality separation at source to make that happen.
All right. So again, to clean separation in the streams. This is going so well that we now have almost run out of time, but I think we have space for 2 more questions, Natalia. So pick them well.
All right.
What do we have?
So the question around recycling of PET bottles, PET. The question is very specific, so I am sure the person who asked the question knows what they are talking about. So what is the Avery Dennison adhesive situation? What do we offer for PET recycling? And there's also a question in terms of solubility and reactivation. What's our perspective on that? Potentially Maria or Maurice?
I'll take it, then Maurice can build on my answer with the more technical view. Avery Dennison offers since, I think, 2014, a product which enables recycling of PET. It's called Clean Flake. We work with the associations to get it qualified. There is a new version of the product which has been launched this year, and we have done our best to stick to the EPPP guideline, which is that the adhesive should not dissolve in the water, but the adhesive has to stay on the face stock. And that has to do with the fact that they want to have, recyclers need to have the water as clean as possible and have as few contaminants as possible floating around in the water. There will always be some, like some ink or some things which are separating from the labels, but as much as possible, they want to have everything staying on the label so that they can extract this cleanly separately, and they can extract the PET, which is sinking to the bottom, also separately. So our product is sticking to that requirement. There is also another requirement from one specific recycler in the Nordics for solubility. And there are also products, both from us and also other suppliers on the market, which offer this solubility. But the challenge there is that it's only one specific recycler, only for the Nordics, and then those kind of products would not be accepted in the rest of Europe because the other recyclers don't want to have solubility. Maurice, am I missing anything?
Sorry, very quickly to interrupt here. So, or to build on this. So tomorrow, I would really encourage the participants to join tomorrow's session, where we will really go into much more detail on product solutions and sustainable solutions, because basically for every single packaging type you can think of, we do have a solution. So tomorrow we will go much more in depth.
Good comment, Rob. We have a specific session where we will talk you through basically all that can work on the discussion we had today, what you can choose from there. Do we have any further questions?
We do, and you promised me one more. So I'll choose one more. And we will still have time at the end of the session, most probably, to answer the rest. So please bear with us. But this question is important, I think. You refer, our panelists refer to guidelines. And the question is, where can I find those guidelines? Where do I look at? So any advice?
Yeah.
What to consult?
Yeah, a lot. So it depends on the guidelines on what, because I know, for instance, like EBBP website, you can find guidelines on labels for PET recycling, but also you can find a lot of the guidelines for HDPE, PP, flexible, rigids on the Reciclass website. So that's where you can find them, and if you cannot, I'm sure we can help you get the right link to the guidelines.
Thank you. It's a very complex topic about the guidelines, and again, I can only encourage you that you reach out to any of us or your direct contacts within the company who can guide you. We have teams doing nothing else than working with these guidelines. So,
if I can add one thing to guidelines, yes, is that make sure, you know, if you download guidelines, it's only valid for the next minute. Make sure you regularly check up on them, because they might change in time.
You sound like you talk of experience there, Maurice.
Yes, I do.
Yeah, very good. So, so wrapping this one up, it has been a very good session, and I think there was an amount of very good insights. We could talk probably for hours, but we have other sessions coming up here. So I want to thank the panelists for taking time out, and I think it was a good, engaged discussion. So thank you, and I pass it over to you, Natalia, to introduce the next session.
Yes, thank you, Niels, and thank you, panel. A very good discussion. And we continue. The next presenter is product manager Luc Zonefeld, and he's managing premium label solutions at Avery Dennison. And he will give you a bit more insights on principles of sustainable packaging. Luc, the stage is yours.
Thank you, Natalia, and everybody before me. It was a very nice session. I joined the full session. Was a good discussion, and yeah, some of the topics I will also highlight in my presentation. So hopefully I will not repeat a lot of information, but yeah, please stay tuned, because I want to share some nice information as well. So here we go, a little bit on myself. So as Natalia introduced, my name is Luc Zonefeld, with Avery Dennison already for 12 years. I've done various roles in product management. Currently, I'm managing the premium labeling solutions. We are looking at wine and spirits labeling, but also beauty and premium food solutions. On the agenda, so I have about 20 slides. Hopefully I will be able to cover all of them, but I want to talk to you about what is a sustainable product, the 4 R's of sustainable advantage categories, how many materials perform in, how sustainable materials will perform in your applications, and of course then focus around labels. Understanding and supporting claims and documentation. It's a little bit linking to what we mentioned on the guidelines. So try to understand what you talk about, and then last but not least, a little bit on the eco design. In the very end, there is an option to ask your questions as well. I'm more than happy to answer them, but feel free also to raise them again in the Q&A option. So, although it's a bit of an open door, many industries are looking at different sustainable packaging solutions depending on the product type. Yeah, so we look at glass packaging, we look at plastic packaging, but yeah, they all have their different parameters and constraints, but also advantages. So, as said, a little bit of an open door, but there are very important considerations to So. Also in that area, there are quite some developments, and it was discussed in the panel as well. And also there are many solutions on the market, but what actually makes a product more sustainable or a product sustainable? So at Avery Dennison, we look at sustainability in all kinds of forms when it comes to our products. There are some key routes which we prioritize, and those are similar to what we see with the most brand owners. They include the item's ability to improve recyclability, we look at enabling the packaging to be reused, and we also look at the reduction of the consumption of natural resources. Yeah, so bringing down the weight of packaging or materials. So besides what Avery Dennison is doing, of course, we also see a lot of things happening around us. Yeah, so on the screen we have examples of the categories I just mentioned: reduce, reuse, recycle, and recyclable. So those are the 4 R's. We do see a lot happening or we do also see appear at the brand owners. So, for example, on reduce, we see Unilever. They have a brand called Dove, and they are offering their deodorants in a compressed can. So a much smaller can. The product inside has the same quality, but they made the size of the can 50% smaller. Very well known, I think, for most of us is the brand called Lush. So Lush is a typical brand which has eliminated a lot of packaging material. So they see, if you go to the shop of Lush, many packaging-free products. If we talk about reuse, we see, for example, Nestle doing pilots with refillable coffee and pet care dispensers. You go to the shop, you bring your own bottle, you bring a pre-bought container, and you refill your packaging at the spot. When we talk about recycled content, we, for example, see Procter & Gamble offering a bottle made from beach plastic. Yeah, so the plastic was collected, and they make a very nice new bottle out of that. In the recycling or recyclable category, you can see PepsiCo, that's the most left crisp bag, being made out of a 100% compostable material. So also those type of brand owners, they look at all kinds of routes. I just name a few, but there are many, many more examples to be given on this topic. So as we go through the presentations yesterday, today, but also the next few days, it will become obvious that all involved in the packaging ecosystem will need to work together to provide sustainable packaging solutions. It's not only the packaging producers, the brand owners and users, but also governments, collectors and recyclers. It's very important to take the full life cycle in consideration. So not only the manufacturing, but also the end of the life of the products. So if we look at labels, so how do they perform? And of course, I want to mention you should always test the product when you are considering it. Yeah, so as a label converter, test how it converts. As an end user, see how it performs in the end user applications. But in general, so if we look at paper and film, so those are, let's say, the common choices we have to make when deciding for a label. When you talk about paper, and I think the image, I hope it's clear for everybody, but the image shows some impurities. So you see a very nicely designed label for a citrus, so a limoncello, and you can see some black spots. And in this recycled looks, let's call it recycled look, has a very nice visual appeal. It often is appreciated, but what you should realize, it can cause also problems for a very fine print. If you think about ingredients lists, but also in pharmaceutical applications where you need to be 100% sure that what is printed is readable and not mistaken. These black spots or different colored spots will may cause disruption or a product not to be properly readable. So this needs to be taken into account. We spoke about, or independent discussion was also about the quality of the paper. Recycled fibers, although, for example, liner material is a very good paper, the more times the paper is being recycled, the shorter the fibers become, and the less strong the paper will be. So therefore, as mentioned, it's very important to check the suitability for especially high-end applications when considering recycled content in papers. We now talk about recycled papers, but of course you can also go for thinner types of paper, lower weight. Again, look at it throughout the full value chain if performance is as it needs to be. In film, again, we talk about thinner materials, but I want to highlight here a little bit on chemically recycled and mechanically recycled. It was in the panel discussion a topic as well. So chemically recycled products are, as well as mass balance products, are often, or in most cases, offered at the same performance as and appearance as fossil-based products. They are the plastic monomer or polymer is brought back to the actual chemical, and a new film is made out of it. So you would not see any performance different. But in mechanical recycling, the product may have impurities, as I gave with the example in the papers. And you have small black spots, you have some air entrapments. So those will have a visual effect on the product. Sometimes it's appreciated, but again, there are some critical applications in which you should not be having any contamination visible, and then probably a recycled product is not the right, or mechanically recycled product is probably not the right choice for your application. Moving on a little bit on greenwashing. Yeah, so for me, greenwashing, I think not everybody knows the term, but greenwashing means that you try, as you do with the washing machine at home, you try to get some spots out of it. You try to make look something great. And in greenwashing, you try to make sustainability claims which you cannot back up. Ideally, and that's what we want to convey here, is you need to avoid greenwashing. Yeah, so do not make something look more great than it actually is. So what you can do to avoid greenwashing? I think that's the main one for this slide is understand what you talk about. So we have developed as Avery Dennison a glossary in the slide. It's a link that will be shared with you, so you can click through it. We prepared a glossary, and on the next slide there will be some examples. But that clearly explains, let's say, the common sustainable terminology which you come across. So really, spend time, read through, understand what you talk about. Next one is to ask for certification or some kind of other proof for the claims that are made. I think a very good example is FSC or ISCC. They call it chain of custodies. Yeah, for the whole value chain, they need to fulfill all kinds of requirements. So make sure that you ask for proof what your supplier is claiming. I said you ask for proof. You can get proof by asking for a certificate or a written document. But even better is to seek support from an independent organization. Yeah, there are many organizations which critically look at all claims made. You have all kinds of independent consultants who really are critically looking at material, data sheets, certificates, etc. So my message here is really seek for the proof. Always also ask under what conditions sustainability claims are made. Yeah, for biodegradation, for example, there are no globally agreed guidelines. Yeah, biodegradation. maybe a little bit of a silly example, but a regular plastic in maybe 200 or 500 years will also biodegrade. It will fall apart, but yeah, is 500 years a real time frame in which you want to claim biodegradability? So really ask, like, what is the temperature? What is the environmental condition you look for, but also what is the time frame? Is it a week? Is it a month? Is it 2 years or maybe 10 years? Yeah? So understanding a little bit on the sustainability claims. I mentioned already the glossary. Yeah? So this will be made available to you to have a read. I just want to highlight one or two. It's too much to read, but in the glossary there are 30, 40, I didn't even count them, but many of these terms which are commonly used in sustainability. Yeah, so biomass, for example, it's renewable organic material derived from trees, plants, and agricultural urban waste. Yeah? I think it's pretty obvious. We try to have one term and then a very small type of explanation. Life cycle assessment, or LCA, well, that would be a method for calculating the environmental product of the environmental impact of a product, material, or service. Yeah? Again, I will not go through. Some examples are here on the screen, but there are many more in the glossary link, which will be shared. Now we go to the eco-design. Yeah, so eco-design, I want to explain you a little bit what it's about. So eco-design, we consider, as many others, as an essential component for the product design process. In each stage of development, requirements have to be fulfilled to meet the final design criteria that make a product more sustainable than the product it's replacing. It drives the designer of the product to choose the right materials. In the label space, where we are part of, we have, as Avery Dennison, incorporated eco-design in the criteria for decrease of material use, increase of recycled content, but also develop more products that improve the quality of the recycled material afterwards. Yeah? For example, clean flake. And again, feel free to ask your questions in the Q&A if something is not clear. So going a little bit more in depth, and it will be highlighted a little bit more in the next coming days, but I was just asked to give a little bit of a flavor on eco-design. There is a European eco-design directive. That means that not this is invented by Avery Dennison, but it's a really framework that that sets mandatory ecological requirements for energy-related products, and it's agreed upon in all 28 European member states. Yeah? Its current scope is around 40 product groups, which include then also labels, and these 40 groups, they are responsible for 40% of the European Union's greenhouse gas emissions. So if we make improvements there, it's really significant in the greenhouse gas emissions reduction. The objective of the Eco-Design Directive is that manufacturers of energy-consuming products from the design age are obliged to reduce the energy consumption. So really reduce energy, but also look at the negative other environmental impacts of products, enforcing environmental considerations that would be material use, water use, polluting emissions, water issues, and recyclability. Yeah? So it addresses a lot of those. So how is this impacting our industry? So I have two examples which I want to share. Yeah? So it was mentioned in the panel discussion, monomaterial already a little bit. So monomaterial we see happening, for example, in the flexible packaging. Yeah? So flexible packaging has a positive sustainability profile. It generally uses less resources than hard plastic. It's lighter weight. It helps reduce food waste, and there's some other benefits as well. But the problem comes with the end of life. Multiple flexible packagings are made out of multi-layered, where to make sure that the product inside stays fresh. So all kinds of barriers are added, not only for oxygen, but also for light and some other environmental impacts. So many communities widely do not really separately sort flexible packaging. In Europe now, regulations start, regulation forces, or at least favors, heavier plastic containers over flexible types of packaging. So what we see currently, a lot of flexible packaging ends up being landfilled or incinerated for energy recovery. This clearly drives what's happening for the last 1.5 to 2 years, the use of monomaterials in flexible packaging. Yeah? So adding barriers which are not harmful, or adding different aluminium and plastic, so eliminating those kind of layers and only making one type of only use one type of plastic, making it easier to recycle. So that is a clear, I would say, trend, and also what's happening in the packaging industry. Another one which I want to highlight, it was already mentioned a bit before, around compostable packaging. So biodegradable, compostable, often they are mixed, or people do not understand what is the clear difference. Again, I invite you to read the glossary. Then it's clearly explained. But one of the ways of making sustainable packaging, also Ellen MacArthur supports, is making products compostable. So what this means that you compostable, you can put your packaging safely to the earth. It will disappear almost entirely, and the material can be reused as soil conditioning or mulch. These materials can be added to compost piles, but I must say what we currently do see a lot for packaging materials, those are often best suited for industrial composting piles. And that is for sure a challenge for us as Avery Dennison, but also we see in the packaging industry to make all these types of packaging also suitable for home composting. So doing it in the back of your garden. If we talk about compostable packaging, so what is it about? It's again, I mentioned it before, seek proof. So compostability can be, it's just a word, but seek proof. So there is pretty strict regulation or legislation around what can be called compostable, yes or no. Yeah. So compostable materials, like we have some self-adhesive materials as well, they go through rigorous testing, which considers disintegration, so can it fall apart, biodegradation, so does it really biodegrade. It should also be safe for the plants which you try to grow on it, so it should be non-toxic. All of these are described in a standard called EN 13432. Also, here it's very important that you seek proof from an independent party. Yeah? So bring your product, bring your packaging to an independent lab to really evaluate the suitability for composting. Then we arrive at my last slide. This is a little bit of an overview. I will not go through all of them. They will be addressed in the next coming days as well. But what we want to show with this overview is that we have various types of packaging substrates. We see here, for example, PET, HDPE, PP, and then below that, where in end-use segment it's commonly used. Yeah, for PET, for example, we see it commonly used in beverages, food, home and personal care. We also see what kind of labels, what type of labels are currently used. Yeah, for example, PP wraparound, PP wet glue or pressure sensitive, but also full body sleeves or partly sleeves. And then what I want to show and highlight here, of course, is what is the Avery Dennison solution for these types of packaging. Yeah, so for PET, we would say, look at our Clean Flake technology. For HDPE, look, for example, in monomaterial packaging. So try to put your PE label to a HDPE bottle, etc., etc. More will be highlighted in the next coming days. Then I arrived at the end of my presentation. I hope it was very clear, or it was clear, and I'm open to take questions now.
Thank you, Luc. Thank you very much. So we are back to the general Q&A session, and I would love to open up to Niels. Do we have any more questions, either to Luc or to any of the other speakers?
Thank you. Thank you, Luc. Very interesting presentation and topic. We do have a few questions, and if I could ask the panel that we had before as well to be on screen. We have a question which is a little bit out of our normal comfort zone. There's a question about how to consider inks in the discussion when you choose a label. Is there something you need to consider? Is there any advice from our side? Don't necessarily talk over yourself, but maybe Maurice have a point on this. Is ink something we need to consider when talking about circularity and recycling of labels?
I think, yes, in the guidelines, and I'm just thinking about how it's described over there, but at least in the guidelines it says, it does say something about inks to be,
non-toxic, I remember.
Yeah, correct. So I need to see how it's mentioned there in the guidelines.
Yeah. So again, it's not a clear black and white on this one. There is, maybe it's more comment, but it would be interesting maybe from you, Rob, to hear your feedback, and I can chip in myself. Is the situation about sustainability, is the CO2, so the emission data, actually turning into the only true way of proving sustainability in itself? I don't know if the question was clear.
Oh, I did not quite get it, Niels, to be honest.
The question is coming if we're moving towards a situation where CO2 data analysis impact is the ultimate real currency of sustainability. So that we all make all these, how should I say, claims about sustainability, but it all has to be backed by facts and figures is kind of how I read this. I don't know if you have any points to share.
Yeah, you know, for me, it is what you see. CO2 emissions is probably the number one measure, which a lot of products are compared to each other. And then, you know, based on that, what has the best or the least CO2 emissions. But I think if you look at a little bit broader, there will be also much more focus, for instance, especially in the future, on water consumption, for instance. So, you know, clearly now there's a lot about CO2. Water will definitely come. Yeah, that would be my take on it. Yeah.
I would agree to this one that we said in the beginning, we said it yesterday, that SBTi, various forms of life cycle analysis and giving true data points is the way forward to ensure that we both achieve our own goals, but also that we can compare apples and apples on this one. So I fully second this one. There is a question, if you can take this one, Maria, is Clean Flake only for PET and glass bottle recycling? What about HDPE bottle recycling?
So for glass bottle recycling, we have glass recycling or wash-off adhesives, depending whether they are recycled or they are being reused. But today, Clean Flake is only for PET because today there is no hot wash recycling process for HDP. In Europe, HDP and most of the world actually, HDP is being washed at ambient temperature, so that's around 40 degrees today, maybe even 20 in some cases, which means that there is no opportunity to separate the label from the HDP package, because as you can imagine, a lot of HDP is also used in humid environments or, for example, under the shower, and we still want the labels to stick while you're using the product. So that is why today, in the current recycling process, labels would be recycled together with the package. So that is what we were saying earlier about monomaterial. So the best thing for the HDP package today is not to put Clean Flake on it, but to put a global MDO or a PE85, for example, label, and then you can make sure that it can be recycled as monomaterial together with the package.
And to add, if I can quickly to add to that, so also if even HDP would be recycled in hotter temperatures, it's a different substrate. So a PET is a different substrate than HDP. So the adhesion of the label will be different. So even if you would use the same label in, let's say, the same environment of recycling, you could end up that it will not work. And to come back to the question on inks, sorry, so I just looked up. So in the guidelines, it's following the EUPA guidelines of use of ink. So they should be non-toxic, and then they should be allowed in the recycling stream.
Just a quick follow-up question on that one. Then we also get a question if UV inks are compostable. I know it's turning into a printing session instead, but if anyone has any insights, maybe you, Luc, you talked about compostable earlier.
Yeah, so far, at least that I'm aware, there are no inks which are officially compostable. So what we do see that inks can be used, but in a very, very little amount. Yeah. So what I advise to do is to consult your certification body. I can name TUV Austria or DINCERTCO to ask about what percentage of the label or the packaging can be printed to allow for compostability, because there is indeed some room for something to not officially be compostable. It can be like a very small percentage which will end up in the soil not being composted.
Yeah,
so
correct.
UV inks for sure, not compostable, but I'm not aware of any other inks either.
Okay, we got a very specific question. It's almost like a pop quiz here. So I'll leave it to any one of you who to answer this one. So straight to your face, what is the best choice for a label for non-returnable bottles, both in terms of paper and film?
Glass bottles?
It doesn't say, but maybe we say one or the other. Do we have any preferences on this one?
If it's glass and it is non-returnable, so we typically call that one-way glass. You dispose it in the recycling bin. It can be a film. It can be paper. Actually, what I like, a lot of these questions, and I'm going to build here a little bit of a cliffhanger. A lot of these questions will be answered tomorrow, where we go much more in depth on the various recycling streams and the different solutions, how they behave in those recycling streams.
Okay. So you'll elaborate more on this one tomorrow. So much that's more. A cliffhanger.
Yes,
that's
absolutely.
A good sell. You should think you were in sales. Thanks, Rob. I am slowly but steadily running up. Maybe we have a last minute coming in here. Let me see a second. Yeah, it's a little bit in the same ballpark. If we now look to the most sustainable option for paper label used on cardboard, recycled face material or thinner material. So it's a question about go thin or go recycled on papers. No pressure on this afternoon hour here. Anyone?
Why not both?
Exactly.
But you only need one label.
recycled and thinner. In the future, probably there will be different thicknesses of recycled paper available.
Great answer.
But also tomorrow we will have a paper specialist.
It's good, Rob. Keep it going. Keep it going.
Yeah.
All right. I am basically seeing that we are running slowly but steadily out of time and out of questions. So I don't want to drag this on unnecessarily, but I think it has been a really good session, and I thank the panel for a very engaged discussion and the audience for some very good questions. And also Rob for leaning into the next session tomorrow, where we're going to talk way more about detailed product specs and so forth. So no further ado, back to you, Natalia, to wrap us up.
Yes, thank you. So thank you again all for joining us today. We sincerely hope the session was insightful for you. And tomorrow you hear more about solutions, label solutions. On Thursday, there is a sustainability experts panel discussion. So please make sure you join. We really look forward to seeing you tomorrow and on Thursday. And just as a reminder, all sessions are being recorded, and you will receive a recording after you complete the event. So thank you very much and have a great afternoon.
Thank you.